My name is Ava Mitchell, and the Christmas tree was still lit when my mother-in-law slid a pen across my kitchen table and said, "If you don't put my son on that deed tonight, you're admitting you never planned to be family." The paper under the pen was a quitclaim deed template she'd printed at home, my address typed neatly at the top, like she owned the place. My place. The house I'd bought with my own savings, my own credit, my own down payment, every closing cost, every inspection fee, every sweaty hour of overtime that went into the wire transfer. My husband, Ethan, didn't look up from his phone. He stared at the screen like he could scroll past what was happening. Outside, it was one of those Midwestern Christmas nights where the air feels like glass. Inside, my living room smelled like pine and cinnamon candles, and the stockings were already hung mine. Ethan's, and the one his mother insisted should say Grandma in glitter letters, even though we didn't have kids yet. She tapped the pen again. Tap, tap, tap. "Ava," she said in that sweet, mean voice she reserved for humiliating women in front of their own husbands. Joint ownership is normal. It's what real couples do. It's what family does. I kept my hands folded in my lap so she wouldn't see they were shaking. Not because I was scared of her, because I wasn't sure what scared me more. Her entitlement, or the way my husband was letting her do it. "You brought legal paperwork into my home on Christmas," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She smiled like I'd just told a cute joke. "I brought security. Ethan deserves to be protected. We need to make sure that if anything happens, he isn't left out in the cold." Ethan finally looked up. "Mom, can we not do this right now?" She didn't even turn her head. "No. We do it now. This is exactly when we do it. When everyone's together, and we can be honest." My throat tightened. "Honest would be admitting you've been trying to get your hands on my house since the day I bought it." Her eyes flashed, but she recovered fast. "Your house," she repeated, making the words sound selfish. "See? That's the problem. Your house. Not our house. Not Ethan's home. You say you love him, yet you keep everything under your name, like you're planning your escape." The room went quiet, except for the faint Christmas music playing from my phone speaker, some soft, cheerful song about peace on earth that suddenly felt like a cruel prank. Ethan swallowed. "Ava, it's not like that. It's just, it would make Mom feel better." I stared at him. "So my mortgage is something we adjust based on your mother's feelings?" His cheeks flushed. He was the kind of man who hated conflict so much he'd sacrifice other people's boundaries to keep the room calm. The kind of man who told himself he was being easygoing, when really he was being absent. My mother-in-law leaned forward. "Let's stop pretending. You're good with money. We all know that. But this," she tapped the deed, "is about showing you're committed. Ethan told me he feels like a guest here." I turned to Ethan so fast I almost dizzy laughed. "Did you tell her that?" He hesitated. That half second was enough. I nodded slowly, like I was taking notes. "Okay." My mother-in-law's smile widened. "So sign it. It's Christmas. Give your husband a real gift." I didn't sign. Instead, I slid the paper back toward her, gently, politely, and said, "No." Her smile dropped like a curtain. "Excuse me?" "No," I repeated. "This house stays in my name." She pushed her chair back hard enough that it scraped the floor. "So that's your answer? After everything Ethan has done for you?" I almost laughed again, but it came out bitter. "Everything Ethan has done for me." Her face hardened. "Don't twist it. If you're going to treat my son like a roommate, then maybe you shouldn't be married at all." Ethan winced. "Mom." She raised a hand. "No. Let her answer. Look me in the eye and say it. You don't trust my son." My heart beat loud in my ears. I did trust Ethan. At least I trusted the version of him I thought existed. But trust wasn't supposed to mean handing over assets to prove love. I stood up, palms flat on the table, and finally let my voice sharpen. "You want me to prove I'm family? Then stop trying to take what I built." Her eyes narrowed. "What you built?" I met her stare. "Yes, what I built. I paid for this home before we were even married. I saved for years. I paid the down payment. I paid closing. I pay the mortgage. If you want Ethan on the deed, then you can explain why you're the one pushing it, like you're the beneficiary." Ethan's phone buzzed again. He looked down. then up, then down, like he was physically incapable of staying present. My mother-in-law's voice turned icy. Fine. Keep it in your name. But don't be shocked when people notice what kind of woman you are. Then she looked at Ethan. Put your coat on. We're leaving. And my husband started to stand. That was the moment something inside me stopped pleading and started calculating. Not revenge. Not cruelty. Just clarity. Because if he could get up and walk out of my house to soothe his mother's ego, then my marriage was already cracking. And I wasn't going to be the woman who waited until the roof caved in to start protecting herself. That night, after they left and the car headlights disappeared down the street, I sat alone under the glow of the Christmas tree and opened my laptop. I didn't cry right away. I didn't even feel dramatic. I felt organized. And I typed 3 words into a search bar, like a prayer. Estate planning attorney. 2 days earlier, I'd been excited about our first Christmas in the house. I'd taken time off work to decorate. I'd bought matching flannel pajamas Ethan swore he'd wear for the photo, even though he'd rolled his eyes. I'd picked ornaments that said Mitchell family, because I wanted to believe in that word family as something safe. But the truth was, family was the word my mother-in-law used when she meant ownership. I grew up the opposite of that. My parents weren't rich, but they were the kind of working-class people who taught me that money doesn't make you better, it makes you responsible. My dad worked union jobs. My mum did payroll for a small construction company. They fought sometimes, but never about control. When I was 22, my dad had a stroke. I watched my mum navigate hospital paperwork like a battlefield. HIPAA forms, insurance appeals, power of attorney documents. I learned early that love doesn't protect you from bureaucracy. Paper does. So when I got older, when I got my first real salary and started saving, I saved like someone who'd seen what happens when people assume it'll be fine. I built a safety net. Not because I planned to run, because I planned to live. And then I met Ethan. He was charming in a quiet way. Soft-spoken. Funny when he let himself be. The kind of man who remembered little things, my coffee order, my favorite Christmas movie, how I liked my pillow. But he also had a mother who treated him like property. And he'd never learned how to say no to her without feeling like he was committing a crime. At first, it was little things. She'd buy him clothes and act offended if he didn't wear them. She'd call him 3 times a day and panic if he didn't answer. She'd drop by unannounced with leftovers, then rearrange my kitchen drawers while I was at work. I told myself she was just intense. Then Ethan proposed. We were engaged for 9 months. And during those 9 months, she slowly started saying things like, make sure your finances are merged before the wedding. Men shouldn't feel like guests in their own homes. If you really love my son, you won't keep secrets. By secrets, she meant boundaries. When I bought the house, Ethan and I were already married, but we'd agreed mutually, calmly, that the purchase would be under my name because I had the stronger credit and I was the one putting down the down payment from my savings. Ethan said it made sense. He said it was just paperwork, and I believed him, until his mother decided paperwork was the only thing that mattered. After Christmas, she didn't stop. She escalated. She'd call and say, I talked to a friend who's a realtor, and she said it's suspicious when a wife won't add her husband. She'd text Ethan articles about financial abuse that basically implied I was holding him hostage. She'd show up with homemade cookies and a smile, and while she handed me a plate, she'd casually say, so when are we updating that deed? We can do it after New Year's. There are services online. It's easy. The most exhausting part wasn't her. It was Ethan, because he'd nod along and say, we'll talk about it, like my home was a group project. One night, in early January, after she'd left, and the house finally went quiet, I asked him directly, Ethan, do you actually want your name on the deed? He sat on the couch, rubbing his temples. I just want everyone to calm down. That's not an answer, I said. He sighed, like I was the difficult one. Ava, why are you making this a thing? I stared at him. Because it is a thing. It's my biggest asset. And your mother is treating it like her retirement plan. He flinched. Don't say that. Then prove it's not true, I replied. Tell her to stop. He didn't. He just stared at the floor, trapped between comfort and integrity. And I realized deep in my chest that I was married to a man who would rather disappoint me than disappoint his mother. That's when I made my decision. Not to divorce him immediately. Not to explode. Just to protect myself quietly. Before, I was forced to protect myself loudly. I booked an appointment with an estate planning attorney named Marisol Chen in a small office near downtown. One of those places that looks boring from the outside, but feels like safety when you sit in the chair. Marisol was brisk, but kind. She had the calm confidence of someone who's seen every version of family drama and doesn't flinch anymore. She asked me questions like, did you purchase the home before or after the marriage? Whose funds were used for the down payment? Are you in a community property state? Is there a mortgage? Do you have a will? Do you want the home to go to your spouse if you die? Some of those questions made my stomach twist. Of course I love my husband, I said, hearing my own defensiveness. But his mother is pressuring him. And Marisol held up a hand gently. You don't have to justify protecting yourself. People think estate planning is only for death. It's also for life. It's for contingencies. Divorce is a contingency. So is betrayal. I swallowed. What can I do? She leaned forward. First, we clarify what you want. Do you want Ethan to inherit the home if you pass away? I hesitated. The old me wanted to say yes automatically. The new me pictured Ethan standing up from my Christmas table to follow his mother out of my house. I want the home protected, I said slowly. I want it to stay mine. And if my marriage collapses, I want to make sure I'm not forced to split the house because I trusted the wrong people. Marisol nodded like I'd just said something ordinary. Then we create a plan. A will is a start, but depending on your state and your goals, you might want a revocable living trust. You can also update beneficiary designations on accounts. And if the marriage is strained, you can consider a postnuptial agreement. A postnuptial agreement. The word sounded heavy, like admitting something was wrong. But something was wrong. Marisol gave me homework. Gather my closing documents, mortgage statements, proof of funds for the down payment, and any major accounts. She also told me something that stuck, like a nail in my mind. People who pressure you to add their name to an asset rarely do it for love. They do it for leverage. When I got home, I didn't tell Ethan about the meeting. Not because I was trying to be sneaky for fun, because I didn't trust him not to tell his mother, even accidentally. And that realization hurt more than any insult his mother had thrown at me. Over the next few weeks, I moved quietly. I pulled my closing folder from the safe. I organized statements. I printed the wire confirmation for the down payment, the money that came from my savings account, built from years of grinding and saying no to vacations and yes to stability. I updated my will. I created a trust. I appointed a backup trustee, my cousin Lena, who'd never asked me for $1 in her life, and had once slept on my couch after a breakup, and still managed to leave my kitchen cleaner than she found it. I changed beneficiary designations, so my life insurance didn't automatically funnel into Ethan's hands without protection. I set it so the money would go into the trust, managed by someone who couldn't be manipulated by a woman like my mother-in-law. And the biggest thing? I put a clause in my plan that, if my marriage dissolved, the home remained separate property to the fullest extent allowed by law and documentation, backed by proof that the purchase and payments came from my funds. It wasn't a magic shield. It wasn't a guarantee. But it was a foundation. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law ramped up. She started inviting us to Sunday dinners, where she'd seat Ethan next to her and me across the table like a defendant. She'd bring up joint ownership in front of relatives. Ava's very independent, she'd say, smiling, and everyone would laugh like it was charming instead of pointed. One afternoon, she cornered me in her kitchen while Ethan was outside, helping his stepdad with something that didn't need help. She handed me a mug of cocoa like we were girlfriends. You know, she said softly, Ethan is stressed. I waited. He feels like he doesn't belong, she continued. Men need to feel secure. If he doesn't feel secure, resentment builds. I stared at her over the rim of the mug. Are you threatening my marriage? Her smile stayed. I'm warning you. As a mother, I don't want my son hurt. I set the mug down. Then stop hurting him by pulling him into your control games. Her eyes flashed, finally dropping the sweetness. Control games? That house is going to be half his if you two divorce anyway. All I'm asking is that you stop acting like you're better than him. I took a breath and tasted something metallic anger. I don't act like I'm better than him. I act like I'm careful. There's a difference. She leaned in. Careful women end up alone. I leaned right back. And careless women end up broke. Her jaw tightened. You're disrespectful. No, I said. I'm awake. She stepped back. And for a second I saw exactly what she was. A woman who measured love by what she could extract from it. That night, Ethan and I fought in the driveway, breath turning to fog in the cold. Christmas lights still hung from our gutters, because Ethan hadn't taken them down yet. He rubbed his face. Why can't you just do it? Why is this the hill you want to die on? I stared at him. Because it's not a hill. It's my life. He exhaled hard. It's just a name on paper. No, I snapped. It's a legal interest in my property. It's leverage. It's control. His eyes narrowed. So you don't trust me? I laughed, once sharp and tired. Ethan, I trusted you when I agreed to marry you. I trusted you when I bought a house for us. But now your mother is drafting paperwork at my table, and you're acting like I'm the problem. He threw his hands up. She's my mum. She's not trying to steal from you. I stepped closer. Then tell her to stop. He opened his mouth, then closed it. That silence was louder than anything he could have said. A week later, I got a notification from my credit monitoring service. Not a disaster, just an alert. Someone had attempted to access a line of credit inquiry under my name. It didn't go through, but it chilled me. I called the bureau. I locked things down. I added extra authentication. And then I asked Ethan a question I already knew the answer to. Did your mum have my social security number? He blinked. Why would she? Because someone just tried to run credit under my name, I said. And she's the only person who has ever demanded access to my financial life. His face went pale. Ava, that's crazy. I stared at him until he looked away, and that was the moment my plan shifted from protect myself quietly to prepare for impact. Because if she was willing to poke around my financial identity, she wasn't just pressuring me, she was testing what she could take. So I stopped waiting for Ethan to become brave. I became brave for myself. The breaking point came in mid-December, almost a year after that first Christmas confrontation when Ethan told me we were hosting Christmas Eve at our house because Mum already told everyone. He said it like it was weather, like he couldn't control it. I stood in the kitchen holding a grocery list. Ethan, we didn't agree to that. He shrugged. It's Christmas. Don't make it weird. My stomach tightened. Don't make it weird? You know what's weird? Your mother planning events in my house like she owns it. He snapped, suddenly sharper than usual. You're always looking for a fight. I stared at him. No, I'm always cleaning up the mess you refuse to confront. He walked away, and for the first time, I didn't follow. I didn't plead. I didn't cry. I went upstairs, opened the safe, and looked at the folder labeled Trust plus Will, like it was a flashlight in a dark hallway. Christmas Eve arrived anyway. The house was full. Her side of the family, her friends, her church ladies, people I barely knew, drinking wine and complimenting the decor like they'd paid for it. I wore a red sweater and a calm smile and moved through my own home like a hostess in a showroom. My mother-in-law arrived in a dramatic coat and kissed Ethan's cheek like he was still 12. She handed me a gift bag with tissue paper and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, I brought something special for the house. My chest tightened. She waited until everyone had a plate of food, until the room was warm, crowded, distracted. Then, she clinked her glass with a fork, like she was at a wedding. Family, she said, beaming. I'm so grateful we're all together. And since this is our first Christmas Eve in this home, I think it's the perfect time to make something official. My stomach dropped. She turned toward Ethan and reached into her purse. Out came a folder, another deed, another pen. She held it up like a trophy. Ethan and Ava are going to start the new year the right way. No more separate this, separate that. One household, one team, joint ownership. A few people clapped awkwardly because they didn't understand they were applauding a boundary violation. Someone said, "Ah, that's sweet." Ethan looked like he'd been ambushed too, but he didn't stop her. He just sat there, eyes flicking to me like a nervous kid. My mother-in-law smiled at me across the table. Go ahead, Ava. Don't be shy. The room buzzed with anticipation. And I realized she'd planned this. She'd brought an audience, so I'd feel forced to comply. My heart pounded, but my hands were steady. I stood up slowly. The chair scraped the floor, and conversation quieted. I smiled soft, controlled, and said, "Since we're making things official tonight, I agree. It's time for paperwork." Her face lit up. Ethan looked relieved. People murmured approvingly. My mother-in-law slid the folder toward me like a queen granting mercy. "I knew you'd come around." I didn't touch her folder. Instead, I walked to the sideboard, opened a drawer, and pulled out my own envelope. Thick, labeled, prepared. I returned to the table and placed it in front of her. Her smile faltered. "What's that?" "It's my paperwork," I said pleasantly. "Since you love documents so much." Ethan's eyes widened. "Ava," I held up a hand, still smiling. "No, it's fine. This is family, right? We're just being honest." I turned to the room. "Everyone, I'm glad you're here, because I don't want any confusion. This house was purchased with my funds. The deed is in my name. There will be no joint ownership." A few heads tilted. Someone's fork froze midair. My mother-in-law's voice sharpened. "Ava, don't do this." "Oh, I'm doing it," I said calmly, "because you tried to corner me with an audience." Her cheeks flushed. "You're embarrassing us." I opened my envelope and pulled out a single page clean, professional letterhead at the top. "This," I said, "is confirmation that my estate plan has been updated. My house remains protected, under my trust. If my marriage ends, the home does not become a bargaining chip." The room went very quiet. My mother-in-law stared at the paper like it had insulted her personally. "You updated your will behind Ethan's back?" I turned to Ethan, and my smile finally faded. "I updated it because your mother keeps trying to take my home, and you keep letting her." Ethan's mouth opened, but nothing came out. My mother-in-law's voice rose. "So you planned for divorce? You planned for failure? That's what this is." I leaned forward, voice steady but cutting. "No, I planned for reality. And since we're doing family honesty tonight, I'll say what you've been dancing around. You want your son on my deed, because you want access, you want leverage, you want a claim." Her eyes flashed with rage. "How dare you?" And then she said it loud, clear, in front of everyone because she couldn't control herself anymore. "If you're going to act like a cold little landlord, then get out of this family and stop wasting my son's life." The words hit the room like a slap. Ethan finally stood. "Mom, stop." But it was too late. The mask was off. I looked at Ethan. "Did you know she was bringing that deed tonight?" He hesitated. "That half second again." I nodded slowly. "Okay." My mother-in-law jabbed a finger toward me. "He deserves a wife who doesn't treat him like a tenant. You're not the prize here, Ava." I took a breath and felt something settle into place, like a lock clicking shut. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I said, clearly, for everyone to hear, "This is my home. If anyone here thinks I owe ownership, as proof of love, you're welcome to leave." My mother-in-law's face twisted. "You can't kick family out on Christmas Eve." I met her eyes. "Watch me." A gasp fluttered through the table. Someone whispered my name, like a warning. Ethan looked panicked. "Ava, please." I turned to him. "No, this ends tonight." Then I looked back at his mother. "You came into my house with legal documents and tried to pressure me in front of strangers. You just told me to get out of your family. So here's my answer. You don't get to claim what I paid for, and you don't get to threaten me in my own home." I picked up her folder, closed it, and slid it back to her. "Pack it up." Her lips trembled with rage. "You're going to regret this." I nodded once. "No, I'm going to remember it." People started shifting. Chairs creaked. My mother-in-law stood abruptly, knocking her napkin to the floor. "Ethan, we're leaving. Now." Ethan looked at me like he wanted me to rescue him from the decision. I didn't. He grabbed his coat and followed her. And this time, when the door closed behind them, I didn't feel empty. I felt free. Later, after the guests awkwardly filtered out, muttering excuses, avoiding eye contact, I stood alone in the kitchen with half-eaten pie and the smell of cold gravy. The Christmas lights blinked softly, like they were trying to cheer me up. I stared at the sink full of dishes and realized something. I had been trying to save a marriage by shrinking myself, by making things smooth, by swallowing disrespect. And none of it had worked. So I made the next decision. Quiet, firm, unromantic. I called Marisol, the day after Christmas. I sat back in her office while she reviewed my documents again and asked, "Do you want to separate?" I swallowed hard. "I want to stop being threatened in my own house." She nodded. "Then we take steps." Steps looked like this. I documented everything. The attempted credit inquiry, the printed deed, the Christmas Eve confrontation, the text messages, the pressure. I opened a separate checking account for my paycheck, then rerouted direct deposit. I confirmed the mortgage was only in my name. I confirmed insurance policies. I changed passwords. I changed the locks not out of spite, but out of safety. Ethan came home 2 days after Christmas, quiet and pale, like someone who'd been scolded for failing a test. He stood in the foyer, staring at the new lock keypad. "Did you change the code?" "Yes," I said. His jaw tightened. "That's my house too." I looked at him calmly. "No, it's not." His face reddened. "Ava, this is insane. You humiliated my mum." I almost smiled. "Your mum humiliated herself." He stepped forward. "She was trying to help us." I held his gaze. "She was trying to control me." He scoffed. "So what? You're just going to kick me out?" I took a slow breath. Here it was, the moment where he'd finally pick a side. I said, "I'm not kicking you out. I'm giving you a choice. Couples counseling, real boundaries, and your mother stops discussing my assets forever. If you can't do that, then yes, you need to leave." His eyes widened. "You're giving me an ultimatum?" I nodded. "I'm giving myself peace." He stared at me like he didn't recognize me. And maybe he didn't, because the woman he married was the one who tried to keep everyone happy. This woman had learned that happiness that depends on your silence isn't happiness. He shook his head slowly. "You're acting like you're better than all of us." I laughed softly, tired. "No, Ethan, I'm acting like I'm done, being treated like I'm disposable, unless I hand over a deed." His voice rose. "My mum thinks you never wanted this marriage." I stepped closer, voice low and deadly calm. "Then your mum should stop using my marriage as a crowbar." He flinched. "Don't talk about her like that." I tilted my head. "Interesting. You've never said that to her about me." That landed. His face tightened, and for a second I saw the shame. But shame didn't fix anything. He looked away. "I can't just cut her off." "I didn't ask you to," I said. "I asked you to stop letting her run our lives." He swallowed. "I need time." I nodded. "You have until Sunday." When he left to stay at his mother's, because of course he did, I sat on the couch under the tree and finally cried. Not because I missed his mother. Not because I regretted standing up. Because I realized how long I'd been alone in my marriage without admitting it. But grief didn't stop my plan. It sharpened it. Over the next month, I followed through. I filed for a legal separation. Not to punish Ethan, because I needed legal clarity before his mother could twist things further. I asked Marisol to communicate through proper channels. I stopped taking calls from Ethan's family. I blocked his mother after she left a voicemail calling me heartless and telling me she'd make sure everyone knows what kind of woman I was. In mid-February, Ethan asked to meet at a coffee shop. Public, neutral, like he was afraid I'd bite. He looked exhausted, like someone who'd spent weeks being fed a story about me until he didn't know what was real anymore. He said, "My mum says you're going to take everything." I sipped my coffee. "I'm going to keep what I bought." He frowned. "But we're married. Doesn't that mean—" "Marriage doesn't mean your mother gets a stake in my home," I said. "And if you were ever actually worried about security, you could have contributed. You could have built together. Instead, you let her treat me like an enemy." His jaw clenched. "She thinks you planned this." I set my cup down. "I planned protection. There's a difference." He stared at the table. "I don't want a divorce." I watched him carefully. "Then what do you want?" He hesitated. "I want things to go back." I almost laughed, but it wasn't funny. "Back to what? Back to me swallowing your mum's disrespect so you can stay comfortable?" He looked up. I'm sorry, he said quickly. Okay? I'm sorry. She shouldn't have done the deed thing. I waited. He swallowed. And I shouldn't have let her. That was the first real sentence he'd spoken in a year. I nodded slowly. What are you willing to do about it? He opened his mouth, then closed it again. And in that silence, I felt my answer forming. 'Cause the truth was, love without action is just a story people tell to avoid accountability. I stood up, put on my coat, and said, Ethan, I hope you become the man you keep promising you are, but I'm not sacrificing my life to wait for it. His eyes widened, panic rising. Ava, please. I held up a hand. No more pleading. If you want a marriage, you'll build one. You'll set boundaries. You'll protect me, the way I've protected us. But I'm done paying the price for your mother's control. Then I walked out. Spring came, and with it, a strange new quiet. The house felt different, not lonely, just mine. I repainted the guest room into an office, the color of soft cream. I planted herbs in the backyard. I hosted my own friends for dinner, without worrying someone would weaponize the word family. Ethan's mother tried one last time. In April, she showed up at my door with a manila envelope and that same sugary voice. I just want to talk. I didn't open the door. I spoke through it. You're not welcome here. Her voice sharpened instantly. You can't keep my son from his home. I laughed softly. Watch me, she hissed. You think you're so clever with your trust? Courts don't care about your little papers. I leaned my forehead against the door. Calm. Maybe, but I do. And you don't get to intimidate me anymore. She slammed something against the door, maybe the envelope, and left. Inside the envelope was a printed article about divorce settlements and a handwritten note that said, You'll lose. I took a photo, emailed it to Marisol, then shredded it. That summer, Ethan finally agreed to counseling alone. Not couples counseling, his own. He sent me a message that wasn't about his mother's feelings or his fear. It just said, I'm learning how wrong I was. I didn't respond right away. I didn't rush, because healing isn't a sprint back into comfort. It's a slow return to self-respect. By fall, the separation became a divorce, not a dramatic courtroom war, but a clean legal ending. Ethan didn't fight for the house. He couldn't. He had no claim strong enough to justify the cruelty it would take to pursue it. And maybe, finally, he understood that pushing me for it would prove exactly what I'd been saying all along. The day the divorce finalized, I sat on my porch with a mug of tea and watched leaves fall in the yard I paid for. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt grounded. A year later, another Christmas, my house was decorated again, but differently. Not to impress, not to perform family, just to enjoy it. I hung stockings again, but this time there were no glitter demands, no forced traditions. I hosted a small dinner with friends who showed up with warm food and real laughter and no paperwork. And when the Christmas lights blinked softly in the window, I realized the message I'd been trying to learn since that first pen slid across my table. Love isn't proven by what you surrender. Love is proven by what you protect, especially when it's yourself.